because it's obviously been true. He's been played, I think, very successfully by Putin since Trump's inauguration. But it's something he's obviously never going to accept publicly.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've had John Bolton on. He's the former National Security Advisor under Donald Trump. We speak to him about these fighting words between Trump and the Kremlin. Trump says that they're playing with fire, so we speak to him about that, the fact that he's changed his tune. We speak to him about what his strategy would be if he were to be working in the White House still. We also speak to him about King Charles's speech to the Canadian Parliament, whether it was a snub to Donald Trump, and the fact that Trump still thinks that Canada wants to be the United States' 51st state. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube. John Bolton, former National Security Advisor and former US Ambassador to the UN, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me again.
I want to start off with these comments from Donald Trump. We've kind of seen a bit of a change in tune from him as we expected in the way that he operates, but we've seen these fighting words from Trump. We saw him write on Truth Social on Tuesday that what Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. What's your reaction to this comment from Trump?
Well, they're very similar to what he said during the 2024 campaign, that the war in Ukraine wouldn't have happened if he had been president. So now that he is president, he's protecting Russia from all these unspecified bad things. I think it's part of a process that you do have to take seriously, that he may be moving toward a stronger stand against Russia. Other things that he said in the days before that comment were, I don't know what happened to Putin. I don't know what the hell is going on with him. And that's a way to distance, for Trump to distance himself from Putin, having previously said they were best friends, they had a great relationship, and he would be able to solve the problem in 24 hours. That obviously hasn't happened. Clearly it's not Trump's fault, because it never is, so it must therefore be Putin's fault that he didn't turn out to be the good old Putin that he knew in years gone by. And I think a number of other comments, maybe we'll see more in the coming days, are all to that same effect, that somehow Putin is dialed out of his former relationship, and that's why we haven't made progress. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that strict sanctions against Russia are coming, because also this week he's managed to say about Vladimir Zelensky, everything that comes out of his mouth causes trouble. I don't like it. I wish he'd stop. So he hasn't gotten any fonder of Zelensky. He's just pushing Putin to the side, or at least that's what it seems.
Yeah, and I think it's been made evident, John, not even just through that, of course, altercation in the Oval Office in late February, but it's clear to anyone who follows Donald Trump, even in the 2024 presidential election, I should say, that he doesn't like Zelensky. He's still holding a grudge against him, especially when he went and campaigned with Kamala Harris. But this commentary from Donald Trump when he talks about Putin, and it's this less than flattering approach than what we've seen in the last few months since he was inaugurated. I wonder if he realized that his approach with this flattering, this wanting to be his friend, has failed. And he knows it's failed, but this is his way of kind of switching gears without saying that his approach was a bit of a failure.
Yeah, you can guarantee that Trump will not say he's ever failed at anything, and so this could well be part of that maneuver. He in subsequent posting on Truth Social, I think he said that Putin had gone really crazy, and the Russians responded by saying, we can understand that President Trump's under emotional strain. So they're kind of going back and forth at each other. It's interesting, though, that I think it's possible the Russians see Trump's withdrawal from the ceasefire talks as a sign of weakness, and they're going to press what they think is their advantage. There was an interesting article in the New York Times yesterday, unrelated to Ukraine and Russia, but about Trump's tariff policies, which are one day they're in and the next day they're not, and then they're back and then they're postponed and who knows what. But the stockbrokers in New York are calling it the taco trade, not after the Mexican food, but the taco stands for Trump always chickens out. And if that's a perception that's growing in the Kremlin, that could actually turn out to be bad news for Ukraine, because they don't that perception would indicate that the Kremlin doesn't think Trump is going to do anything particularly damaging to them.
But do you think the Kremlin and Putin have been waiting for Donald Trump to lose interest in the war, John? Or do you think that Vladimir Putin actually needs this attention from Donald Trump?
Well, I think for a long while, with some justification, Putin thought he was getting what he wanted from Trump. Trump made a number of critical concessions, conceding that we would not insist on the full restoration of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, that we would not agree to Ukraine joining NATO, that we would not support NATO's security guarantees for Ukraine. Those are enormous victories for Putin before the negotiations even began. And I think Putin probably thought he had more room to press Trump, and that's what he's been doing. We'll see what happens in the next few days, but so far the Kremlin hasn't indicated they're worried about these statements by Trump, and they may see them for what they are. As you indicate, this is just his way of pivoting and trying to make it look like it's not his fault.
We saw in response to Donald Trump's comments saying that Putin was playing with fire, we saw one of Putin's top security officials and the former Russian president respond to this, and he wrote on X that regarding Trump's words about Putin playing with fire and really bad things happening to Russia, I only know of one really bad thing: World War III. I hope Trump understands this. Now, this is kind of threatening language that we haven't seen from the Kremlin when it comes to Donald Trump. I wonder, is this enough for Trump to finally realize that there is really no such thing as a negotiation when it comes to the Kremlin?
Well, that's what he should see, because in effect what the Russians are saying here is that they're threatening the wider war, whether it's a wider conventional war or their threat to use nuclear weapons, that for 3 years had a terrific deterrent effect on Joe Biden and NATO, that they were constantly worried if they gave Ukraine this weapon system or that weapon system or increased the aid dramatically, that Russia would respond with a wider war. So the Kremlin was able to get a lot of advantages during the years since their invasion simply by threatening, in effect, more subtly than has just happened here. But they may figure Trump needs to see it in plainer terms, and they think that the threat of World War III, which he will interpret, I think, as a nuclear threat, will in fact back him away. They'd love to get Trump out of the business of diplomatic efforts on a ceasefire, because the Russians just don't see the Europeans as being able to get their act together, and they'd love to just see the division inside the EU in particular.
And we know that Donald Trump kind of leads by ego. We know that he's had this drive to be Putin's friend and to be approached by Putin unlike any other president, that they would work together harmoniously, John, which of course anyone else thought was completely impossible. But Donald Trump would come out and basically say he doesn't believe that Vladimir Putin wants to take any more land other than Ukraine. He doesn't believe that he wants to take Poland or any other Eastern European country, which of course Putin has blatantly said that he does. And then we have this comment, of course, saying that World War III could happen. So I wonder if Donald Trump is finally realizing that, no, he's been lied to.
Well, he should come to that realization, because it's obviously been true. He's been played, I think, very successfully by Putin since Trump's inauguration. But it's something he's obviously never going to accept publicly, which comes back to this idea that somehow Putin has changed, gone crazy, lost his mind, and that Trump was right when he thought before that Putin wanted peace, but through no fault of Trump's, Putin has now taken a different position. That's what he said to the Europeans, basically.
I want to get your thoughts, John. Obviously, you worked as a national security advisor under Donald Trump. And say, hypothetically, you were still in the role and you were advising Donald Trump and the rest of the administration on kind of what to do next. What would you be advising Trump and his team on what the next steps would be? What is the new strategy?
Well, if you come to the correct conclusion that Putin has no interest in a ceasefire, and for what it's worth, I don't think that's necessarily in Putin's best interest. I think he could use a ceasefire for a lot of very good reasons, like to rebuild his army. But that's obviously not the course he's pursuing. I don't think it's too late to say to NATO as a whole, look, we have not really handled this war for well over 3 years now in a strategic fashion, which is one reason we have gridlock. But let's take advantage of what the Ukrainians have done with massive improvements in drone technology. I mean, they're doing research and development on the battlefield in times that make our whole procurement process look like it's from the time of the dinosaurs. It just takes forever to do anything. And let's get a strategy together and see if we can help Ukraine actually defeat the Russians and regain their territory. I don't think it's out of the question. If the Russians really had the capacity to overrun Ukraine, they'd have done it by now. They don't. They're weakened. Their Black Sea fleet has been decimated. Their armies have suffered terrible casualties in terms of killed and wounded and missing. The estimates are now approaching 1 million casualties. This is a stunning number. The issue really is whether Europe still has the will to continue and whether Trump would seize that opportunity. I don't think he will, but it's possible at least, and I think very desirable, that he at least keep up the level of military assistance that the U.S. has been providing, so that Europe maybe can provide more, but that we can give Ukraine at least a chance to break some of this gridlock on the battlefield.
Do you think, John, that it's time for Trump to stop these empty threats on secondary sanctions and the tariffs on any country importing Russian oil and actually start implementing them, so at least the Kremlin knows that Donald Trump is serious about the fact that he will ruin your economy and Russian livelihood?
Yeah, I think the threat, there are a lot of different sanctions being talked about, but I think the secondary sanctions threat against countries that are still buying Russian oil, contrary to the earlier sanctions, would have an impact, because then you would be affecting countries other than Russia. I think everybody just needs to have a clear understanding when we get into it. We're going to have trouble with China, with India, with a lot of countries like that. And it sure would be nice if we weren't also in a trade war with those countries, not to mention a trade war between the United States and Europe. But, you can't have everything, I suppose.
Absolutely. The other thing is, you mentioned kind of helping Ukraine, John, but do you see a world in which Donald Trump would not only continue this aid, this military humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but almost get so to speak, pissed off with Vladimir Putin that he started giving Ukraine more aid, more help, even aerial support, because we know that we'll never put US troops on the ground. It's unlikely that we would put UK troops on the ground, but aerial support would make such a difference, as you mentioned, drones before. So I wonder if there's a world in which that Putin pisses Trump off so much that he gives them more resources to fight this war on their own. As you said, any expert would tell you, as you mentioned, that the Russian army are struggling and the Ukrainian army are a lot more experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I don't think Trump's anywhere close to it yet. But what Zelensky should be saying to him is, and I think Zelensky's been having conversations with the British government on this already, we would like to do more with our drone technology. How about we license it to you and you manufacture it, you can sell it back to us, or you can incorporate it in your own military. I think if Zelensky can find something like that he can show tangible benefits to Trump, that would get Trump's interest. The mineral deal that was signed has that prospect, but you don't go out and dig a mine over the weekend. It's a lengthy investment process, a lot of capital committed. Here's something that the Ukrainians already have, technology they've proven on the battlefield at a very low cost, really just some incredible improvisation, and not just in drones, but in other areas too. I think the U.S. and NATO as a whole could take advantage of that, and maybe if Zelensky can become something of a salesman for what they've learned with Trump, that might encourage him. I mean, it's worth a try. I don't see that Zelensky has anything to lose.
We've spoken about this change in tune of Donald Trump, John, the fact that he'll probably never come out and admit there were failures in kind of siding with Russia. But I wonder, obviously it's now been seen that Putin is showing his true colours to Trump. He's showing that they're not friends. There's no alliance there. But how do you think the Trump administration and Donald Trump currently feel? Do you think they feel stupid when it comes to that pivotal moment in late February when they voted alongside Russia, alongside North Korea, Belarus at the UN General Assembly?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Trump looks back at moments like that. He doesn't care that much about the UN anyway, for a lot of very good reasons, actually. I think where this is going to come into play again, though, is in dealing with China, because one of the clearest things that's been happening is the growing closeness, the axis between Beijing and Moscow. We saw it again just a few weeks ago at the Victory in Europe Day parade in Moscow, where Xi Jinping was Putin's most honored guest. So I think Xi Jinping doesn't want the war in Ukraine. He supports it. China supported it in many ways. He doesn't want that to get in the way of his agenda in East and South Asia. So this gets pretty complicated after a while, and Trump would like nothing better than to sit down with his good friend Xi Jinping. So the idea that you can be friend of one but angry at the other, that doesn't work too well. And Trump's capable of very quick changes. He could decide tomorrow that actually he and Vlad are friends again, and things could go off in a different direction. This is the nature of a presidency that doesn't have firm philosophical and strategic foundations for its foreign policy.
Did that worry you, Ambassador Bolton, when you saw Xi Jinping being, the guest of honor at Putin's VE Day military service? Did it worry you that there was this further alliance between the two?
Yeah, this has been going on for some time. It obviously didn't happen overnight, but really for a period of 10 to 15 years, perhaps even longer. I think people have seen that as Putin pulled away from the West, despite the efforts of a lot of people, all of them unsuccessful, in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, to bring Russia closer to the West, to bring it closer to NATO. That's not the direction that Putin ultimately followed, and there's his famous speech to the State Duma in 2005 where he said the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. It's been clear since then he was moving in a very different direction, both to reestablish the Russian Empire, but really even back then you can see the beginnings of growing closer to China. So this is a long process. It may be accelerating, but in any case, directionally, it's still moving in the wrong direction from our point of view.
Just to wrap up what's happening in the Russia-US ties, Ambassador Bolton, when you're looking at the situation, and we've spoken about Trump's senior staff, and there's been so much commentary of course, Mike Waltz stepping down, Marco Rubio now taking on 2 jobs. We've got Pete Hegseth, we've got Steve Witkoff. When you look at Trump and his top inner circle, do you think that they're equipped to be handling this situation right now between Russia and Ukraine?
No, I think the decision-making process, which, look, certainly in Trump's first term it was pretty chaotic, is even more chaotic now. And, that's a risk in times that are growing more threatening, more challenging, that you're not going to get the best decision-making. And that stems primarily from Trump himself. But when you break down the process, you're simply diminishing the chances that the seasoned advisors can warn you of potential pitfalls, can think ahead 2 or 3 moves to what Putin or Xi Jinping are really trying to do, and have a better sense of how your policy should evolve and what the strengths and weaknesses are and what modifications need to be made. And it sounds depressingly logical and straightforward, and it is. That's not the way Trump thinks, and I just think in a dangerous time it makes us more vulnerable.
Just to move on to what's happening over in Canada, we've seen King Charles III visit Ottawa. He had made a speech to the Canadian Parliament where he seemed to be kind of referring to the various attacks that Donald Trump has placed on Canada's sovereignty. I'm just going to read out a quote for our listeners, but he basically said freedom and democracy were under threat in Canada. Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination and freedom, values which Canadians hold dear. Canada's relationship with its partners are also changing. We must be clear-eyed. The world is a more dangerous and uncertain place than at any point since the Second World War. Canada is facing challenges that are unprecedented in our lifetimes. Do you feel like this was a massive snub to Donald Trump, John?
Yeah, no question about it. It's no accident that the king went to Canada to read out the speech from the throne at the first opportunity he had, really, under his reign. And his mother obviously went some time ago. I'm sure it's true in Canada as it is in the United Kingdom that the monarch's speech is written by the government of the day, and he says what they want them to, and it was a very clear message. And also to remind people that Canada really is a foreign country. It has a king and all that sort of thing that we don't. So it's going to be a very interesting state visit when Trump comes to visit the king later this year or whenever it's going to be. Maybe they can talk about their mutual affection for Canada.
Oh, I was about to say, John, we obviously saw that moment where Keir Starmer brought the invitation from King Charles into the Oval Office. And so many people thought, what a great move from Keir Starmer, as he was, treading on eggshells after Donald Trump had met with Zelensky the week before or so. So I wonder if Donald Trump will even show face in the UK after that.
Well, I think he looks forward to this state visit. I can tell you, I accompanied when on the last state visit with Queen Elizabeth, the white tie dinner in Buckingham Palace. I think if Trump could have stayed all night, he would have. I've never seen him so happy. So he's definitely looking forward to it.
I want to read out, at the time also, Donald Trump posted this on True Social. He said, I told Canada, which very much wants to be a part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. What's your reaction to that, John? Because from what we've been covering, I don't know if they're considering this offer.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump at some level understands Canada's never going to become the 51st state. Maybe some of our fellow Republicans have said to him, if you did admit Canada as a state, it would vote Democratic in the Electoral College, in the Senate, and the House primarily. So I think he just doesn't want to look like he's given it up. The fact is, we can't have national missile defense in the U.S. just geographically unless Canada's part of it. Just as during the Cold War, we had what was called the DEW line, the distant early warning line of radar stations from Alaska through Canada to Greenland, where we also had radar stations, to detect Soviet missiles coming over the North Pole. So we were defending Canada then, and just by definition, going back to Ronald Reagan's idea, the Star Wars initiative, we would have covered Canada too. They can certainly help us pick up part of the cost, but we're not doing it to benefit the Canadians. We have to do it in order to cover ourselves, and they're beneficiaries, which makes me very happy for them.
I wonder if they'll do it, John, if they'll put forward money to also have, this Golden Dome system. For anyone who's confused as to what this is, it would be the United States' own Iron Dome that Israel has benefited from so heavily. So I wonder if it is in the best interest for Canada to actually cough up the money and join in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge project, but this really, Reagan began the idea. George W. Bush took it a long way when we withdrew from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which allowed us to construct missile defense. A lot of Europeans back in Bush's presidency objected to this. They said, there go the Americans again, they're going to build this national missile defense system, they're going to leave us out here vulnerable. When it was always our intention, once we perfected it, to make it available to all of our allies, because that strengthens the deterrent against attack by rogue states or by Russia, now increasingly by China. So it's well worth the investment.
I want to move on to more of a domestic front. We've seen the Trump administration having this showdown with Harvard University this week. It's been revealed today that Trump has ordered the US federal agencies to review about $100 million worth of the university's grants, which they'll potentially end or they'll redistribute. They've also frozen $2 billion worth in federal grants and tried to revoke Harvard's ability to enroll international students, which will affect around 27% of the total intake. So what's your reaction to this fight currently between Harvard and Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's largely politically motivated on Trump's part. He knows that his constituency doesn't have much affection for Harvard or other places. Not that I do either. I went to Yale, so I'm glad he's picking on Harvard. But really, it's an attack on a lot of higher education, and people think that they have taken advantage of these government programs and really built up a culture of anti-Semitism and a variety of other problems. I think it's legitimate from a civil rights point of view to be concerned about anti-Semitism on college campuses. So that starts out at that point, the examination of that problem at Harvard or Yale or anywhere else is perfectly legitimate. But what Trump has done now, without any authority at all, is to try to condition the continued extension of federal grants and research projects on Harvard doing other things that really violates the First Amendment in a fundamental way. And I think, there was a Republican vice presidential candidate who ran with Barry Goldwater in 1964. His name was Bill Miller, who was the first one to say the government that is big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you have. And that's what people ought to think about this. Donald Trump may do this to Harvard or Yale, but a left-wing Democrat president could do it to conservative colleges and universities. Not that there are that many of them to begin with, but this business of the government conditioning grants or loans or whatever, they don't have an obligation to give them to Harvard, but if they choose to, they're not allowed on that basis alone to require restriction of constitutional rights. That's called an unconstitutional condition. Harvard has gone to court. I'm sure other universities will as well, and I would expect they would prevail.
And it does seem to be this war on elitism, John, which is, of course, what Trump's constituents enjoy because he does have a lower income base. But I do find it almost comical when Donald Trump jumps on the bandwagon of these things when he's one of the wealthiest men ever. And has grown up wealthy.
Yeah, well, he went to an Ivy League school too, the University of Pennsylvania, and which he boasts about to certain audiences. I guess he doesn't boast about it when he's going after Harvard. Just doesn't want to confuse the base.
Oh, absolutely not. Just a final question for you. Dan Bongino, who's of course the Deputy Director of the FBI, he's announced that he's launching a few probes. He's launching one into the DC pipe bombing, one into the cocaine discovery in July 2023 at the White House, and then the leaks of the Supreme Court Dobbs case. But on the subject of the cocaine scandal, from a national security point of view, do you think it's important that they reopen this investigation of how a bag of cocaine was found in the West Wing, I think it was?
Right, in the mailboxes when people go into the West Wing, employees should put their cell phones and things like that in these boxes, not carry them around the White House, and that's where they found a small bag of cocaine. I don't know what the extent of the original investigation was. The implicit assumption that Dan Bongino is following is that it was Hunter Biden's cocaine or something like that, but that in any event, the Biden White House, the Biden Justice Department covered it up. I'm not aware of evidence to that effect. I can understand why they're suspicious of it. I think they ought to take a fair look at what was done. They may conclude that the investigation was thorough, the Secret Service was involved, and they just ran out of leads to follow. On the other two, the pipe bombing, look, that was serious. I think that was a fully investigated. I doubt they're going to find anything there. And the leak of the Supreme Court opinion, again, I think the investigation there was pretty thorough. If they want to take time to go and review it, really to get political points, I don't see any harm in it. But I don't think much will come of any of these three announcements.
And of course, we know that the Biden family said that they were away at the time because it was the July 4th weekend. But just knowing how much the Republican Party had been going after Hunter Biden in the last 4 or 5 years, I wonder if they'll try and find a way to pin it on the Biden family.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the hidden motivating factor. But at some point, FBI agents who are not I don't know how they vote, what agents are on the team, but they're professional people. If they can't find any evidence, if there are no leads to pursue, if there aren't additional witnesses to interview, if they can't think of other questions, ultimately reality will intrude on this investigation. Now, if there was a cover-up, and as I say, I don't have any indication that there was, then they ought to break through it and see what they can find. I just think it's going to be a lot of wheel spinning, my guess is, on all three of those.
John Bolton, thank you so much for your time today.
Glad to be with you.